The dust-laden wind carried whispers of judgment as Violet Turner stepped off the stagecoach in Cottonwood Springs, Wyoming Territory, 1876. Her threadbare valise clutched tightly against her chest like armor. Behind her stretched 1,000 miles, and ahead lay nothing but uncertainty, her family's parting words still burning in her ears. "You'll never amount to anything worthwhile, Violet. You're damaged goods unworthy of our name." At 22, she had defied her affluent Boston family's expectations at every turn, refusing suitable marriage proposals, insisting on pursuing education, and worst of all in their eyes, surviving a scandal not of her making that had tarnished their precious social standing. When they'd given her an ultimatum, conform or leave, she'd chosen the unknown frontier over suffocation. The small mining town sprawled before her, raw and unrefined, much like the emotions churning within her. Cottonwood Springs was nothing like the polished streets of Boston, but perhaps here, where the land itself was still being shaped, she too could forge a new identity. First time in Wyoming, the question came from a weathered woman standing beside the mercantile. "Is it that obvious?" Violet asked, attempting to brush trail dust from her travel-worn dress. The woman laughed, deep lines crinkling around kind eyes. "Everyone's new here at some point, dear. I'm Martha Wilson. I run the boarding house. If you're looking for somewhere to stay, I've got a clean room available." Relief washed over Violet. "That would be wonderful. I'm Violet Turner." "Well, Miss Turner, welcome to Cottonwood Springs. Fair warning, we're a bit short on refinement but long on opportunity for those willing to work." "Work is exactly what I'm seeking," Violet replied with more confidence than she felt. The boarding house proved neat but simple, a far cry from her family's Beacon Hill mansion. Martha showed her to a small room with a narrow bed, washstand, and a window overlooking the main street. "Dinner's at 6, Martha informed her. "And if you're serious about work, the schoolhouse needs a teacher. Previous one married a rancher from Montana and left us high and dry mid-term." Violet's heart leapt. She'd received proper schooling and had always loved learning. "I would be very interested in that position." "Town meetings tomorrow evening. You can present yourself to the council then," Martha said with an approving nod. That night, Violet wrote in her journal by lamplight, documenting this first day of her new life. Sleep came fitfully, her dreams filled with echoes of her father's condemning voice and her mother's tearful disappointment. Morning brought sunshine streaming through the thin curtains and renewed determination. Violet carefully laid out her best remaining dress, a simple blue cotton that had once been her third best day dress in Boston, but now represented the height of her wardrobe. Martha directed her to the schoolhouse, a modest wooden structure at the edge of town. Inside, Violet found uneven rows of desks, a chalkboard, and shelves with a pitiful collection of books. Yet something about the sunlight streaming through the windows filled her with hope. "Not exactly what you're used to, I expect." The deep voice startled her. Turning, she found herself facing a tall man framed in the doorway, his broad shoulders nearly filling the space. His dark hair curled beneath a well-worn Stetson, and his eyes, startlingly blue against sun-bronzed skin, regarded her with curiosity. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to intrude," she said, flustered by his sudden appearance. "No intrusion, this is public property." He stepped into the room, spurs jingling faintly. "Zane Jennings, I run the Double J Ranch outside town." "Violet Turner," she replied, extending her hand formally before remembering she was no longer in Boston drawing rooms. To her surprise, he took her hand gently. "You must be the Eastern lady Martha mentioned was interested in the teaching position." "I am. Do you have children in the school, mister?" Jennings, a shadow crossed his face. "No, madam, just a civic interest. I sit on the town council," understanding dawned. "So you'll be deciding whether I'm suitable for the position." His mouth quirked in what might have been amusement. "Along with others, yes. What brings you all the way from?" He paused, eyes taking in her attire. "Boston, if I had to guess." "A desire for change," she answered carefully, unwilling to reveal the humiliation that had driven her west. Most folks come here running towards something or away from something, he observed. Sometimes both. Their eyes met, and Violet felt a strange recognition here was someone who understood what it meant to leave a past behind. I should warn you, he continued. The council's particular about who shapes young minds. Some might question whether an Eastern lady can prepare children for frontier life. Violet lifted her chin. I believe education transcends geography, Mr. Jennings. Knowledge is valuable everywhere, true enough. He nodded thoughtfully. But can you ride, shoot, teach practical skills alongside book learning? I can learn what I don't know, she countered. And I'm not afraid of hard work. Something like respect flickered in his eyes. The meeting's at 7. Don't be late. That evening, Violet faced the town council, 5 men seated at a table in the saloon's back room, their expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. Zane Jennings sat at the end, his face unreadable. Miss Turner, began the eldest, introducing himself as Judge Hollister, we understand you wish to become our schoolteacher. What qualifications do you possess? Violet stood straight, channeling every lesson in poise her mother had drilled into her. I was educated at Miss Porter's school in Connecticut, with particular focus on literature, mathematics, and history. I've tutored younger students and children of family friends. Can you handle discipline? Asked a barrel-chested man identified as the blacksmith. Some of these youngsters are right wild. I believe in firm boundaries and natural consequences, sir. Natural consequences won't help when Billy Sanders puts a snake in your desk, someone muttered. Judge Hollister peered at her over wire-rimmed spectacles. Why Cottonwood Springs, Miss Turner? Surely there are more comfortable positions back east. The question she dreaded. Violet took a deep breath. I sought a fresh beginning. My family and I disagreed about my future, meaning. Pressed the judge, she squared her shoulders. They wished me to marry for social advantage. I wished to pursue my own path. A murmur rippled through the room. She could feel judgment forming another pampered Eastern girl playing at independence until the hardships sent her scurrying home. Miss Turner survived a 3-week journey alone to reach Wyoming territory. Zane's voice cut through the whispers. That speaks to determination, if nothing else. Determination won't keep the school running when winter hits, argued the blacksmith. I understand your concerns, Violet said firmly. I propose a trial period. If after 1 month you find my teaching inadequate, I'll step aside with no complaint. The men exchanged glances. Finally, Judge Hollister nodded. 1 month starting Monday. Salaries $30 monthly, plus room and board at Martha's reduced rate for town employees. Relief flooded through her. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. As the council dispersed, Zane approached her. Bold move, offering a trial period. Was it? It seemed logical. His mouth twitched. Logic doesn't always prevail out here, Miss Turner. Please call me Violet, and I refuse to believe the frontier is devoid of reason. Violet, then. Her name sounded different in his deep voice. You might want this. He handed her a small book, Practical Education for Western Children. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, sending an unexpected warmth up her arm. Thank you, she managed. Don't thank me yet. Page 38 has instructions for removing porcupine quills from stubborn children. With that cryptic remark and a tip of his hat, he left her standing bewildered, but clutching her first ally in this strange new world. The first weeks of teaching tested Violet in ways she hadn't imagined. Her 16 students ranged from 6 to 16 years old, with abilities just as varied. Some, like the doctor's daughter, had been well schooled before. Others could barely write their names. They watched her with the wary assessment of young predators sizing up potential prey. True to prediction, Billy Sanders, a freckled 12-year-old with a devilish gleam, placed a garter snake in her desk drawer on the 3rd day. When Violet calmly picked it up, identified it as non-venomous, used it for an impromptu natural science lesson, then assigned Billy extra reading about reptiles, she earned grudging respect from her students. Each evening she collapsed exhausted into bed, her hands chalk-dusted and her mind racing with lesson plans. Yet despite the challenges, she felt strangely alive. Here, her worth was measured by her actions, not her family name or social graces. Zane Jennings appeared periodically in town, sometimes stopping by the schoolhouse after classes. He brought supplies: a box of new slates, maps of Wyoming territory, even a telescope one memorable afternoon. "Ranch business brings me to town," he explained when she questioned his generosity. "Thought these might be useful." Violet learned from Martha that Zane had built the Double J from nothing after coming west following the war between the states. He employed several families, served as unofficial peacekeeper during the sheriff's frequent absences, and despite numerous eligible women's efforts, remained determinedly unmarried at 32. Lost someone during the war, Martha confided over mending one evening. His heart went with her, folks say. Violet told herself her interest was merely curiosity about a town benefactor. Yet she couldn't deny the flutter in her stomach when his tall figure appeared in her doorway, or how their conversations stretched longer each time, ranging from education philosophy to favorite books to the challenges of frontier life. As her trial month neared its end, Violet organized a demonstration day for parents and council members to observe her teaching methods. She'd worked tirelessly preparing her students, developing practical lessons that combined traditional subjects with frontier skills. The morning of the demonstration, disaster struck. Violet woke with a raging fever, her throat so swollen she could barely swallow. Martha took one look and declared it tonsillitis. "You can't possibly teach today," she insisted, pressing a cool cloth to Violet's forehead. "I must," Violet croaked. "If I cancel, they'll think I'm incapable. They'll think you're human, child." But Violet's fears ran deeper than she could explain. All her life, illness had been used against her. Born premature and sickly, she'd heard countless times how her delicate constitution made her unsuitable for anything but the most sheltered existence. This weakness had been part of her family's reasoning that she was unworthy of independence. She dragged herself to the schoolhouse, determined to prove them wrong. The room swam before her eyes as parents filed in, taking seats at the back. Judge Hollister and 3 other council members arrived, followed lastly by Zane, who frowned the moment he saw her. Halfway through her carefully planned arithmetic lesson, the room began to spin. Violet clutched the edge of her desk, struggling to remain upright. From a distance, she heard concerned murmurs, then felt strong arms catching her as consciousness slipped away. She awoke in an unfamiliar bed, confusion giving way to mortification as she recognized Dr. Palmer's clinical room above his office. Zane sat in a chair beside her, hat in his hands, concern etched across his features. "Welcome back," he said softly. "The demonstration," she began, her voice a painful rasp, "is the least of your worries right now. Doctor says you've got a nasty infection." Humiliation burned hotter than her fever. "I've ruined everything. By being human, hardly." He leaned forward. "Your students finished the demonstration themselves." Young Billy Sanders stood up and announced they'd show what Miss Turner taught us even without her directing. They ran that classroom like seasoned veterans. Tears pricked her eyes. "Truly." Judge Hollister was impressed enough to vote for your permanent appointment right there. Unanimous decision. Relief washed through her, followed quickly by suspicion. "Did you influence that vote, Mr. Jennings?" His eyes, so startlingly blue, held her steadily. "Didn't need to. You'd already won them over by teaching those children to think for themselves rather than just recite facts." Dr. Palmer insisted she rest for a week. To Violet's surprise, Zane arranged for her to recuperate at his ranch house rather than the noisy boarding house. His housekeeper, Mrs. Abernathy, a motherly woman with impressive culinary skills, tended to her needs while Zane managed ranch business. In the evenings, however, he joined her on the wide porch, where they watched spectacular sunsets paint the distant mountains. They talked of books and dreams, carefully skirting personal histories like dancers avoiding dangerous terrain. On her final evening before returning to town, Violet found the courage to ask what had been puzzling her. "Why did you help me when you had no reason to?" Zane was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "When you first arrived, you reminded me of someone, but now I see you're entirely your own person. The woman you lost during the war," she ventured. Surprise flickered across his face. "Town gossip travels fast. Martha mentioned it." He sighed, leaning forward in his chair. "Eleanor was my fiancée. Typhoid took her in '63. I came west afterward, couldn't bear Virginia anymore." "I'm sorry," Violet said softly. "It was a lifetime ago." His eyes found hers. "But it taught me something about judging worth. Eleanor's family thought I wasn't good enough son of a tenant farmer courting a plantation owner's daughter. After she died, I promised myself I'd never judge anyone by other standards again." Understanding dawned. "So when the council was skeptical of me, I recognized something familiar." He hesitated. "Your family, they found you unworthy somehow, didn't they?" The perceptiveness of his question startled her. "How did you know?" "Something in your eyes when you speak of them, a hurt that runs deep." The words she'd kept buried spilled out then about the childhood illness that had made them treat her like fragile glass, about her rebellion against their restrictions, about the young man who'd cornered her at a party, and then claimed she'd encouraged him when they were discovered. How her family had believed him over her, deemed her morally suspect, and given her the choice between a marriage of convenience to salvage her reputation or disinheritance. "I chose freedom," she finished, "even if it meant being cast out." Zane's hand found hers in the gathering dusk. "Their judgment says more about them than you." Something shifted between them that night, a recognition of kindred spirits who understood what it meant to be deemed insufficient by those whose approval should have mattered most. The following months brought rhythm to Violet's new life. School thrived under her guidance, and she found unexpected joy in watching her students grow. She started adult education classes 3 evenings a week, teaching reading and mathematics to miners and ranch hands eager to improve their prospects. Zane courted her with frontier directness, accompanying her to town socials, bringing books he thought she'd enjoy, inviting her on Sunday rides to see Wyoming's spectacular landscapes. Their friendship deepened into something neither rushed nor defined, but undeniably powerful. When autumn painted the cottonwoods gold, he took her to a meadow high above his ranch. As they picnicked beside a crystal stream, he finally spoke of what had been growing between them. "I never expected to love again," he said simply. "Thought that part of me died with Eleanor. But you've brought it back to life, Violet." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Are you certain? I'm not exactly the typical frontier wife material." "Thank God for that," he replied with unexpected fervor. "I don't want typical. I want you with your Boston education and your stubborn determination and your belief that every child deserves knowledge." "My family would say I'm unworthy of a man like you," she admitted, voicing her deepest fear. Zane's hand cupped her cheek. "Then they never truly knew you. Your worth isn't determined by their narrow vision." When he kissed her, it felt like coming home to a place she'd never been before. They married in November, a simple ceremony in Cottonwood Springs' newly completed church. Martha stood witness, along with Zane's foreman and several teary-eyed students. Violet wore a dress of deep blue velvet, Zane's gift, ordered specially from Denver. The school board granted her permission to continue teaching through winter, with a young ranch wife serving as substitute on days when weather made travel impossible. Zane expanded the ranch house, adding a library with floor-to-ceiling shelves that he promised to fill with books for her over the years to come. Their first Christmas together brought a blizzard that trapped them indoors for days. By flickering firelight, Violet gave Zane news that left him speechless with joy. She was carrying their child. "Are you pleased?" she asked, suddenly uncertain. They hadn't discussed children so soon. His answer came in actions, rather than words, gathering her into his arms with such tender reverence she felt treasured beyond measure. Spring came late to Wyoming that year. As wildflowers finally carpeted the meadows, Violet's body blossomed with new life. She continued teaching until the term's end in May, her students protective and fascinated by their teacher's changing shape. Summer brought scorching heat, and the increasingly uncomfortable final months of pregnancy. Zane hired additional help so he could remain closer to home, his protectiveness both touching and occasionally smothering. "I'm pregnant, not incapacitated," Violet reminded him when he objected to her tending her garden. "Humor me," he replied, the worry in his eyes reminding her that he'd already lost one love. She understood then that his hovering came from fear, not doubt in her capability. Their daughter arrived on a star-filled August night in 1877, after a labor that tested Violet's endurance to its limits. When the midwife finally placed the squalling infant in her arms, Violet gazed into a tiny face that somehow combined her features with Zane's in perfect harmony. "She's magnificent," Zane whispered, his voice thick with emotion as he perched on the bedside. One finger caught in his daughter's surprisingly strong grip. "Eleanor Martha Jennings," Violet said softly, honoring both the woman Zane had lost and the friend who had first welcomed her to Cottonwood Springs. "Perfect," he agreed, pressing his lips to Violet's damp forehead, just like her mother. As autumn again turned the cottonwoods golden, Violet wrote a letter she'd been composing in her mind for months. She addressed it to her parents in Boston, not expecting forgiveness or reconciliation, but offering understanding. She told them about her life, her teaching, her marriage, their granddaughter. She described the beauty of Wyoming's rugged landscape and the freedom she'd found in this place they'd considered punishment. "I was never unworthy," she wrote in conclusion, "just unsuited for the life you envisioned. Here, I have found purpose and love that accepts me completely. I hope someday you might find it in your hearts to rejoice in my happiness, even if you cannot approve the path I chose to find it." Whether they would respond remained uncertain, but the act of writing released something within her, the last lingering need for their validation. One evening, as winter approached, Violet sat in the library rocking Eleanor while Zane read aloud from Emerson. Snow fell softly outside, the first of the season, blanketing their world in pristine white. "Do you ever regret it?" Zane asked suddenly, setting aside the book. Coming west, marrying a rancher, living so far from civilization, Violet looked up from their sleeping daughter's perfect face. Not for a single moment. Even with all the hardships, she smiled, recognizing the lingering doubt that sometimes haunted him, that someday she might find this life too difficult and long for Boston's comforts. "My family called me unworthy because I didn't fit their narrow definition of value," she said. "But here, I discovered my own worth isn't determined by their judgment or anyone else's. It's in the students whose minds I've helped shape, the community that's accepted me, this home we've built together." Her eyes met his, full of certainty. "It's in your love and in our daughter's future." Zane crossed the room and knelt beside them, one hand gently cradling their daughter's head, the other finding Violet's. "When you first arrived in Cottonwood Springs, you were running from those who called you unworthy," he said softly. "I hope you know now just how worthy you truly are of happiness, of respect, of love without conditions." Outside, the snow continued falling, transforming the landscape. Inside, wrapped in warmth and family, Violet Turner Jennings had finally found a place where her worth was never questioned, a home built on love that saw her completely and cherished everything it saw.